Welcome to the show. Welcome to Grace and the Grind. This is my good friend Ashley DeLuca, and we're here to just kind of really talk about some stories behind the story of how she's gone from a time of struggle to thriving, what that looks like, and the wisdom on how you can do that as well. She is now the CEO of George Bryant. Jordan's a good friend of the show as well, and so Ashley has moved into a CEO position doing that. We're gonna let her unpack what that looks like, what's the life of a CEO, and things like that. So welcome to the show, Ashley.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, so, we've known each other for a while and gone through some really crazy times watching things up and down all over the place. So I want to start this off first and foremost, just let our viewers know maybe some of the journey you've been on to go from where you were, where you started, to be where you're at.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it feels so crazy to say that my journey started over 6 years ago. My very first entrepreneurial encounter was at Panera Bread. I was with my best friend Cece. I always used to joke that she was double the age, double the wisdom. And I was sitting there and I was in my early 20s and I was explaining to her how frustrated I was with the corporate grind. And I was sold this dream that if you just worked up the corporate ladder, you would be fulfilled, you would be happy, things would look great. And for me, as a kind of budding web designer, I felt like I was hitting rock wall after rock wall. And so, as I was in this process of trying to figure out what I wanted to do and really how I wanted to move forward in my life, because I was in college full time, I was working full time, I was doing all the quote unquote right things, and I just wasn't happy. It just wasn't fitting. It just wasn't working for me. And so, it was in that moment that she shared with me. She was like, "You should just open up your own business." And I was like, "What does that even look like?" I've always thought small businesses were brick and mortar, and I was like, I don't know how to bake really well. And come to find out, I was able to start my very first company, Blank Slate Media Consulting, at Panera Bread that day. And I started doing Craigslist jobs. And I don't know how I wasn't kidnapped, but I would meet strange men up at Panera Bread to talk about their website and their business and what they were looking to create, and women too, of course. And so we started there. We started just with this baby little business, just trying to figure out how things were going to work and pursuing this dream of becoming an entrepreneur.
So you said a couple things there that I really I want to kind of dive into a little bit. You work in a full-time job, you're in college, you're doing all the things. And a lot of you and I, our listeners are the same way. They're doing like 900 things.
Mhm.
And so I guess my first question going it, let's dig into that where it says, at what point did you recognize that you were unfulfilled? And then what now are you finding your fulfillment? Like, where was the
Mhm.
recognition point, that realization, that self-awareness? And then what did you do about it? And then where are you in that journey?
Yeah. So, really, the unfulfillment piece was just a little bud. It was like the seed planted that day where I recognized that there could be so much more, that I didn't have to go through the process of becoming somebody else's dream. I could create my own. And it was in that moment that, again, the seed was planted. And it wasn't until probably 2, 3 years later when I became pregnant with my son, Nick. And I was still doing the hustle, the grind. I was still in corporate. I was still going through the process of, being in college full time. And I had this business that I was working on as well too. And so I was adding all of these pieces and I watched somebody else go through a maternity leave like on my team, and I realized I didn't want that. Like I didn't want to just have, if I don't remember how many weeks it was. So for this sake of conversation, let's say it was 12. I didn't want to just have 12 weeks maternity leave or 8 weeks maternity leave. Like I wanted to be able to have both for me and my kiddo, where I could work and go through the process of being able to be there with him. And so when I left, I was just like, peace, like I'm done. I found a different level of fulfillment that seed had planted when I was at Panera that day, that I was able to find that like my fulfillment doesn't necessarily come just from the work that I create and what I do. It comes from being able to be both. to be able to be a mom, to be able to be a business owner, to be able to prioritize my son and to be able to put him first and to make my schedule around him. And what's so interesting, and I'm sure we'll get into this, is that like that conversation, me leaving and then having that seed planted was a complete lifesaver in being able to create the lifestyle and being able to create the dream that I have now.
So so I want to first and foremost, for you guys who are following me online, I always use hashtag wisdom bomb. And so that's been something I've been using for years. And you dropped a big one just a minute ago. And I wrote it down and I hopefully I, say it the way you said it, but it said, I didn't have to be someone else's dream. I could be my own. And I was like, hashtag wisdom bomb on that one, because that was an actual amazing statement, actually. Like, oh my gosh. And then you're using seed like that. Everything is a seed. And I think that's super important because I think there's this deception or this self, like we lie to ourselves a little bit that says, once I leave, everything has to be fullness of something.
Mhm.
And there's a seed, like you leave and it's the small little kernel that pops into something big. So where did you find the courage to do that? When you said, "I left, I planted the seed, and it saved my life." Where did you find that courage? Because I know there's a lot that are struggling with, "I want to, but I'm too afraid to."
Well, it's just for me, it's always been evidence that every time I bet on myself, everything ends out up like perfectly okay. And I know that a huge part of that is just trusting God's plan for me in my life and knowing that God is watching over me and that He's leading me in the direction that I need to go. And with that, I really just fully trust myself in my decisions and knowing that those gut feelings that I have are very much so God signals for me
Mm.
and being able to pair that with knowing that God always has my back. Because truly, like, I think about even just in every moment that I've done that, like the experience that I just shared with everybody here about leaving my corporate job and just going right into entrepreneurship without having the whole saving grace plan that I wish I would have had. I definitely see that as just like the very start of being able to build my courage to then overcome and make even bigger decisions later down the road.
I like that, I love that a lot, and so do you ever struggle with, like, self-doubt or second guessing yourself, and how did you fight through that?
All the time. Even still today, I struggle like yesterday, I struggled with a huge feeling of uneasiness. And I was second guessing, and I was doubting, and I was struggling through all of the feelings. And so I'm very equipped to knowing what that looks like, knowing that it comes in waves and it usually doesn't last long. What's interesting for me is that I usually will feel very confident in what I'm about to do. Like I'm very gun ho. I'm very like, this is it. Like I make up my mind and I stand for it. I don't waver when I make the decision. It usually comes like I almost have like decision fatigue or decision remorse. Like a couple days later down the road, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? When the excitement of standing in your power and your decision and knowing that God has your back fades and you're just like, "We out here now. We out here."
Oops.
Yeah,
Like,
well, here we go.
well, I like that because it's like it's almost like, "Well, it's too late now, I've already made the decision." I think that's a beautiful place to be in because you already made the decision. And there's so many people out there that are struggling to make the decision. Like there's that imposter syndrome, whatever label you want to put it, they're struggling to make the decision. But you make the decision and then you have some struggle afterwards, but the decision's already made. The hardest part is over.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
amazing. I love that. So that brings into another line of thinking. And you said it earlier because you actually said it in a way that says, I get to be both mom, creator, business owner. But that speaks to identity. So, how is your identity fueling your mission in life? And then what were some of the steps you used to create that particular solidness in your identity?
So for me, being a mom drives everything. I didn't know when I first became pregnant that being a mom would drive my entire life and my entire why and all the things. But looking back now, I realize that becoming a mother was one of the greatest gifts that was ever given to me. I really struggled. Like, I had a very extremely rocky and abusive marriage and relationship with my ex-husband. And one of the things that always kept me going in the moments that I wanted to personally give up was having that little baby looking back up at me. And I'd be like, no, like I get to choose to live for him. Like,
Mhm,
regardless of anything else, like I'm choosing to do this for him. And Nicholas is, like, definitely one of my biggest anchor points in everything. He was, like, my hope. He's the one who got me up every morning. Like, even still today, like, when I struggle with, all of the pieces that I'm still healing from that relationship, like, I get up in the morning because he gets to go to school. And
mm.
I know that I have a responsibility to get him up for school. And so even in the moments that I really struggle with my thoughts and I'm really down and I'm really blue and things aren't looking the greatest, because we all struggle with that. Like we just wake up one day and we're just like, why do we feel this way? Like this doesn't feel like me, but we're going to feel through it. He's the one who keeps me forward. And for me, I had to shed a part of my identity as well about being a wife because being a wife was also something that was really incredibly important to me. And I was really proud of that. And I was very excited and grateful and thankful. And I was just like, I feel like I'm fulfilling what I feel like I'm being called to do. Like,
Mm.
God, like I feel specifically like God wanted me to be a wife. God wanted me to be a mother, like, and to experience all of that. And so when I got divorced, like I went through a really hard time with taking that out of my identity. I
Mm,
would have to catch myself and be like, "Oh, no, like, I'm not that anymore for anybody." And
mm,
being able to, like, work through that has just further anchored in for me, like, how much I truly love being a mother and how, like, Nicholas is, like, the most important person in my entire life, and I will do anything for him. And so, regardless of what happens, like, I fully anchor into that, and that is just what has overconsumed everything for me and filled in all the holes, is being able to refine myself as a mother and then as a business owner as well too.
that's amazing, and I love how you say you fully anchored into that. I think I'm gonna do an episode on anchor points at some point because I think that's
Mhm.
super important. I like this word you said, I shed it, my identity, or that
Mhm.
part of my identity. How did that work for you? Like, how long did that take? Like, how hard was that?
It was probably one of the most difficult things that I've done easily. I had the decision point, right? Like, I had the decision point of like, yeah, like this isn't working. Like, we don't belong together. Like, I'm leaving, I'm moving out, like all of that. And
Right.
then there's the opposite part of that decision fatigue or that decision remorse of like, "Oh my gosh, what did I just do?" And I walked through that for months,
Mm,
months of waking up every day. I felt like luckily I lived with my family for those 6 months, and so I was accounted for essentially. The best way to make sure that, like, I took care of myself, I took care of Nick, and I got up and I worked every day. But that first year leading up to the point of the separation and then into the actual divorce was one of the hardest years of my entire life. I don't
mm,
know if I look at my life and I look at the process of like the abuse and the things that I went through as really, really difficult and hard, but I also don't remember a lot of it. Like I blocked out a lot of that. Like my brain just doesn't remember. Like I'll have trigger points where I'll remember things and be like, "Oh my gosh, that happened to me." But then a lot of times, like, I just don't remember, like, I blocked it all out. And so with my healing journey, like, I very vividly remember a lot of it. And
mm,
I know that there was a lot of moments where I really struggled with all of it. And it still takes time. Like, I think I'm still working through a lot of pieces of it. But I would say definitely it was like a year-long process of like working through the doubt, working through the remorse, working through
mm,
the am I making the right decision? I don't know. And then having to have other people remind me of why I was making that decision and why it was the best decision for me.
mm. That's amazing, and
Yeah.
I'm honored to know you. I mean, like, that's a tough thing to go through, and just to
Mhm.
see the meteoric rise you've come out of that, it's just been beautiful to watch. So I just wanna honor
Mhm.
that and recognize that. I wrote down 5 things here, 1 words, basically, that you said that was, like, really kind of a process, which is really fascinating to me. For number 1 was the decision. when you're
Mhm.
shredding his decision. That's probably the most important thing. Once you make the decision, everything else gets easier. You know,
Yep.
the remorse or the dealing with the shame and guilt of that, time, the
Mhm.
proper support, and then the refocus.
Mhm.
And I wanted to write that down because what you said was incredibly important, not only in the area of personal and mental health, but in the shifting of identities. Because we live in a world that really has lost its mind with identity right now. And I think that what you just said was probably some of the most important things that could be shared. So thank you
Mm.
for that.
What's interesting is I don't feel like even in my current state, like as I share this, like I feel very unequipped to being able to lead or guide somebody through the process because I feel very much so a baby to it. Like I just figured it out day by day. Like I woke up, I drank my coffee and I said, "Okay, what are we going to be doing?" But thank you for reflecting that process back to me because I didn't see it that way. I just saw it
Mm.
as something that I did, not something that could be repeatable. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely can be repeatable. And I think there's a lot of people out there who have experienced what you've experienced that's going to really benefit from what you just said and what you did to get through it to be where you are. I mean, you're a CEO of a company. That's incredible to come out of that abusive relationship, to be a stellar mom, to be running a company. That's some great stuff. And I think that it needs to be recognized more. And it goes into how God's working in your life and how much you've been working on your identity and how it's fueling. I'm honored and thank you for sharing all that and being vulnerable enough to share that. So thank you so much for you as well for coming on the show and sharing this incredible, incredible experience. How do you feel like after going through this process, after doing this, that you show up as a leader? Like, how do you feel like you're showing up now?
I definitely show up completely differently than how I used to. I would say like 2 year ago, Ashley was very timid, was very calculated in how she showed up. It was very scripted to only show specific parts with specific intentions. I would share the behind the scenes of like, hey, I'm really struggling with this. This is what I'm going through. Now like been being able to process it within my own self and within more of like a trusted circle.
Mm,
And so I feel like this process for me has definitely been a huge shift of confidence, being able to understand and know the power that I hold and being able to take that with so much gratitude and honor, honestly, like being able to lead and to be able to guide and to be able to focus and to be able to like support George has been one of the biggest catalysts, I would say, in
mm.
part of helping support that decision process. He's one of the first people to remind me of who I am and to remind me of the potential and what future Ashley looks like in a very positive, light, just heart centered way. And I feel like that allows for me to be able to fuel my impact even greater and to be able to give more to people because that's really what I truly desire. And when I'm in a healthy state, I want to show up to serve. I want to give. It feels good for me to be able to just love on people as opposed to like 2 years ago. Like I didn't have anything to give. I was showing up empty every day.
Mm.
And so I was just giving what I could give, and now I feel like I have more of an overflowing bucket to be able to give and to serve and to love, which feels so incredible and amazing to have every day.
That's awesome. So then that also begs the question is, what does Ashley do to fill herself up regularly?
Mm. So for me, it's really about quality time. Like, there's like the 5 love languages, and I'm like, I love all of them. Give me all of them. But I really truly enjoy quality time with people. And so I focus on making sure that I have time to just sit with Nick, to be able to focus on making marble runs with him or to cuddle on the couch and watch SpongeBob, whatever that may be. Like my biggest bucket filler is Nick. And then the people who come underneath of that, like within my inner circle, to have intentional conversations, to make sure that I get to text them every day and to remind them how much I'm grateful for them. And so it fills my bucket to give them some of love because then it just like comes pouring back. which is like
Mm.
beautiful. And so I'm just so grateful for that kind of friendships.
That's awesome. And so then, like, what are you currently reading?
So I am actually reading a book from, I'm pretty sure it's from Brene Brown. I see the cover. Let me see here. It's really good. It's about shame. I know that's kind of like her jam, but it is, oh my gosh. I think it's in my bag upstairs.
That's okay.
Oh, so the book is I Thought It Was Me, but It Isn't by Brene Brown. It's
Thought it was
so
me, but
good.
okay,
Yes.
awesome. I like how it's a book about overcoming shame. That's
Mhm.
something that you had been dealing with in your life. So
Yes.
that's just another piece of evidence that shows the amount of development you've gone through, how God has really put you through some fire and developed you into the amazing leader that you are today. So, as we start winding down the show, what is something, a piece of wisdom or a piece of life that you would love somebody to grab a hold of that says, this is something that you just absolutely need? Like, what would you say to people?
I don't believe that you'll ever regret betting on yourself,
Mm,
whatever that may look like. I do believe in having safety plans in place now that I've gone through the things, but the majority of my biggest moments didn't have a safety plan in place.
mm,
Like, I didn't know, like, when I left my ex-husband, I had no idea what I was gonna do. Like, I had no idea where I was gonna live, what was gonna happen, how long I was gonna be at my parents' house, where I was gonna like, nothing. I had no idea. My stuff was in boxes for 6 months, and I would just pull out random things that I needed. And looking at my life now, like, I have a beautiful home for Nick and I. It's, like, the perfect size. It's the complete opposite of what I used to have. And being able to see that now and to be able to create an environment that is safe and calming and really feels like home for both of us, I never would have had those feelings had I not have betted on myself and just done the thing, made the
mm,
decision, taken the action. And so I truly believe that if you are feeling led, you feel like you're being called to go after something, take the leap, do the
mm.
thing.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Just bet on yourself, and I think the world needs more of that. Um, so if people wanna find you, get connected to you and what you're doing, where would they go? What's going on with that?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're interested in like my own personal life, all the fun things behind the scenes, the best place to follow me is over on Instagram. I'll spell out my handle. It's ASHAHLEEKS. And then if you're interested in seeing more of the business side and all of the fun things that are happening there, I definitely recommend following George. And his handle on Instagram is at ITS and then George Bryant, and all that is together.
Awesome, and I'll make sure that that gets all into the show notes as well, guys. So make sure that if you've made it this far in the episode, make sure you grab a hold of those and then go support Ashley and George. Both are incredible individuals with an incredible mission. And so I do appreciate you being on the show and just all the wisdom and experience that you've dropped. I truly believe it's going to help the listeners who grab a hold of this. You are an amazing light, an amazing individual, Ashley. So thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me and giving me the space to share. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. And so, guys, thank you for being part of the episode. If you like this episode, why don't you go on to the next one?